Hello, my name is Wefel, and for the Global Environmental Health course of Spring 2019, I will be doing my presentation on the artisanal gold mining and lead poisoning that occurs in Zamfara, Nigeria. The purpose of this presentation is to understand the context in which the history's worst lead poisoning crisis, which occurred in Zamfara, Nigeria, how it came to be, what the consequences are, how the environment is linked to the health of the population, and where they currently stand from the outbreak that occurred in 2010. The table of contents gives you an overview of where this presentation will be headed. The first slide will be just an overview on Zamfara, Nigeria, and give you a context in which of the states and villages that the outbreak occurred in. Then we'll go over artisanal gold mining and the safe and unsafe practices of it, how specifically Zamfara was poisoned through lead and also mercury emissions. Then we will lead to the world standards of lead and compare world standards to Zamfara during this outbreak. We will continue with how Zamfara copes with the consequences of this outbreak and where the children stand who were highly affected, the population, and the economics. Finally, the last slide before the summary will be on the link between environmental health and the population. To understand the lead outbreak in Zamfara, you have to understand the region, its people, and the events that set this outbreak up. Zamfara is located in the northwestern area of Nigeria, and even though the nation state are going through a high economic developmental trend, the poverty rate is incredibly high for this area, which is currently standing at 67.5%. In May of 2010, the world was brought aware of the lead outbreak that occurred in two villages, both within Zamfara. Hundreds of children were suffering from vomiting and uncontrolled seizures, with many ultimately dying. Two local areas, Anka and Bangudu, share most of the poisonings, with up to 7 villages which reside in these two government areas. The worst hit was Bajege village, which is located in Anka, Zamfara. The reason why the state of Zamfara, and specifically the hardest hit and impacted village of Bageja, was affected is due to the ore and gold mining process. Artisanal gold mining is when a small-scale operation, usually amongst individuals or a small community, work independently and use basic techniques to process the ore, which involves, in this case, smashing gravel by hand. Without safe techniques, workers have constant dermal contact and inhalation with lead, which is released during the processing of ore, and the lead is turned into dust, which goes on to contaminate the air, soil, livestock, and water of the surrounding region. It is estimated that in this case, safe techniques in the ore mining process could reduce lead and mercury emissions by 90%. Referencing figure 1, you can see that the heaviest hit village of Bageja has the highest levels of lead. This is primarily due to illegal acts of mining, which the population pursues when gold prices increase. Now I will do an overview of lead poisoning in Zamfara and the perpetual cycle that this environmental disaster has on the region. Remembering that the people are highly impoverished in this area, they are more likely to work and perform illegal acts, such as mining, when profitable. Without oversight and safety precautions, gold ore processing is done through highly dangerous techniques that are often cheap and labor-intensive. The environment is contaminated as lead is brought around the region through air and water. Lead on workers' clothes are also brought into homes where children are affected. Lead's impact on developing children and also pregnant women on their fetus is highly detrimental. It causes declining health and intelligence, which will be later analyzed in a further slide. This overall provokes the population to be held back economically as the workers growing up are unfit and thus perpetuates the cycle that lead poisoning has on the people of Zamfara. Now I will briefly go over the levels of lead found in Zamfara during the outbreak and compare it to standard levels around the world. Looking at figure 3b, it goes over standard levels of lead allowed in the soil, water, and air. For example, the WHO recommends no more than 10 micrograms of lead per liter, when during peak outbreak, Zamfara was found to have over 200 micrograms per liter, a very unhealthy and even dangerous amount. The US standard of lead in soil is 400 particles per million levels, and in Zamfara, some areas were found to be at an incredible 60,000 particles per million of lead. Taking that into consideration, you can compare that to Table 3A and other standard levels of lead allowed in the soil around the world, compared to WHO at 100 micrograms, Australia's, the UK, and South Africa's, and you would see that Zamfara during the outbreak was incredibly dangerous, even though the maximum allowed limit of lead in soil varies across areas. The particles per million, the micrograms found in soil, water, air, is highly dangerous and is what led to the ultimate death of hundreds of children and adults and symptoms that will occur for what is expected to be a lifetime. Zamfara was affected primarily through deaths and symptoms acting on children who are the most vulnerable demographic in the population as their bodies are still developing. Figure 4 gives you a sense of where the outbreaks occurred. The government areas of Anka and Bugdu are marked, as is the village of Begeda, the most highly impacted village of the outbreak. And figure 5 gives a temporal sense of who was affected by the outbreak. Children were tested for blood levels that are considered to be lead poisoned. Even though children at these young ages wouldn't be working in the mines, they still show a high percentage of those with lead poisoning. The group that is 48 to 59 months had the highest percentage of the young children that were lead poisoned. Consequences of artisanal mining can be indicated through figure 6, which shows the tested levels of lead in blood over years in infected areas. These are the same children being tested as years progress, and starting at the peak of the epidemic in 2010, it was incredibly high and dangerous, with the majority having almost 150 micrograms per deciliter, and it is slowly declining with the newest research coming in September to December of 2013. Figure 7 shows the lead pathways and consequences for the local children. As the leaded dust contaminates the environment, the children are more prone to some type of intake or dermal touch, which is going to affect their developing nervous system and stunt their bone and muscle growth. This is going to cause language and speech problems, seizures, death, and other symptoms that indicated to authorities that the lead poisoning outbreak was happening. So overall, the consequence of the artisanal mining is that you're going to have much higher tested levels of lead in the blood for your overall children as the epidemic occurs, and if treatment is taken right away and authorities are notified, then you would see what is shown in figure 6 as the WHO and other organizations work to de-lead those impacted. The last slide before the summary, just a quick overrun of how the environment has a strong impact on people and its health. Artisanal mining is currently the largest contributor toward anthropogenic mercury emissions, and the lead that occurs in the environment due to this mining has no beneficial effect on the human body and is incredibly dangerous. So, not only is pollution occurring at a global level, a regional population level is happening, and also the mining causes dredging and slicing to occur, which is severely going to harm the land, causing degradation and river siltation. Zamfara, Nigeria in 2010 witnessed one of the worst recorded lead poisoning epidemics to ever happen in history. Zamfara is a developing region that is highly prone to environmental issues, and this may occur somewhere else if the factors of regulation, poverty, processing, techniques, inadequate health facilities are not taken care of. Now, specific portions of the population are impacted more than others, as can be seen in the previous figures, and modes of contamination are widespread and don't affect just the local population, but can spread throughout, affecting many. The environment has a major link to the people and its health, and is important to take care of. And that is my presentation on artisanal gold mining in Zamfara, Nigeria. The next slide will be the references used throughout the figures, pictures, and information. Thank you.